As the Constitutional Convention came to a close in 1789, delegates left Philadelphia knowing that they had a major job still on their hands. Each of them had to go back and have the conversations within their state of whether their state was going to accept this new Constitution that had been written. Some states passed it very quickly. Other states had major problems. There were a lot of individuals who feared this attempt by Madison and other Federalists, we'll call them, to centralize control and power of the new nation within a national government. Many people were much more willing to trust local state governments. They feared that a national government could lead to another king, another dictator, and so they wanted to make sure that the people's rights were going to be protected. And while the Constitution that was drafted in 1787 included a whole plan for government, it laid out what powers the federal government would have and how those powers would be divided between the executive branch, the legislative branch, and the judicial branch, it didn't say very much about what rights people would have. It didn't name those rights. Thomas Jefferson, as the author of the Declaration of Independence, he was not at the convention in Philadelphia because he was serving as the ambassador to France. Jefferson felt very strongly that this Constitution was missing a Bill of Rights, and he swore, along with Patrick Henry and Edmund Randolph and others, to stop this Constitution from going into effect, because they feared a couple of things. First, they feared that it was going to leave individuals with too little protection of their own rights. And they also feared that states would not have enough power. So anti-federalists, people who were against ratification of the Constitution, argued very strongly that a Bill of Rights had to be added and we had to add protections of state authority. Because under the Articles of Confederation, there was a problem where states had too much power and the national government had too little. The Anti-Federalists feared that we had gone too far with this Constitution in giving not enough power to the states and too much power to the federal government. Well, the priorities for the Federalists were rather different. Their main goal was to get away from the weakness of the Articles of Confederation. So the main priority for people like Madison and Alexander Hamilton and John Jay, they were three main Federalists, were to quickly as possible, approve ratification of the Constitution. They wanted to create a strong and effective central government, as we've talked about. They did not feel that the Bill of Rights was necessary, because the whole spirit of the Constitution, they felt, was a tribute to limited government, that they had given only certain powers to the federal government. And because they had limited the powers of the government through the Constitution, they didn't think that there was an actual need to go ahead and write down what those rights would be in the Bill of Rights. The Federalists wrote a series of very famous documents called the Federalist Papers, and these were a series of letters to the editor. And those letters to the editor were sent to the newspapers in New York in particular, just before the vote was going to be taken by New Yorkers on whether they would agree to the new Constitution or not. Anti-Federalists wrote another series of letters opposing the Constitution. So you had this major campaign on both sides, knowing that they needed at least 9 states to ratify the Constitution in order for it to go into effect. And it looks down to the wire as if Massachusetts and Virginia, 2 major states, large states, including the home state of Madison and Thomas Jefferson both, was not going to ratify the Constitution. So Massachusetts looks very iffy. Virginia, the votes are not there to approve the Constitution. And so finally, James Madison goes to Edmund Randolph, the governor of Virginia and an anti-federalist who opposed the Constitution, and Madison strikes a deal. This is a perfect example of the way politics works even up to today. Madison goes to Randolph and says, look, I don't think we need a Bill of Rights, but I do know we need this Constitution. If I, James Madison, agree to propose a Bill of Rights, the first time Congress ever meets, will you drop your opposition and go ahead and support this new Constitution? Randolph thinks about it for a little bit, and he says, yeah, if you write a Bill of Rights and we can have the guarantee that people's rights are going to be written down and protected so that the government will never be able to take those rights away, and we know that and it's clear, then we'll go along with this Constitution. The deal is struck. Virginia ratifies the Constitution. Massachusetts ratifies it shortly thereafter. And that resolves this conflict of ratification. Now, as we look back on it, it seems obvious in retrospect that the Constitution would be ratified, and the Bill of Rights, which comes out of this deal, is a central part of the Constitution and something that almost all Americans can at least tell you what the First Amendment is or the Second Amendment is. People know that the right to free speech comes from the Bill of Rights. People know the right not to be searched without a warrant comes from the Bill of Rights. And those are things that Anti-Federalists feared would not be guaranteed without writing them down in the Bill of Rights. So, a bitter fight between the Federalists and Anti-Federalists is resolved through compromise as James Madison, a strong Federalist, accepts the Bill of Rights in exchange for the Constitution becoming the new law of the new land.